Okay, so we're going to talk about hourly rates and hourly based pricing. And we aren't going to go too much into what it is and how to calculate it because the assumption is everyone knows it already. I feel like it's the easiest pricing model to do. That's what people usually start out with when they go freelance or start being self-employed. But if you don't know how to calculate yours, or you want to check if it's a good hourly rate, you can check out our hourly rate calculator, which we created as part of our consulting services, and it's free. So yeah, I'm going to link that in the description of the episode for anyone that wants to check that out. But actually what we're going to be talking about in this episode is more of a like critical viewpoint of the hourly based pricing model. But I feel like it's a nuanced take because I think I see a lot of stuff online, and I even posted about this on LinkedIn last week, or was it this week?
I think last week.
I think it was last week, about the hourly based pricing model and whether you should charge by the hour or not. And I feel like my post was more nuanced because I feel like there's legitimate use cases for it. But we're going to talk about why you shouldn't in this episode.
Yeah, I think it's a bit, like you already mentioned, a nuanced topic. And therefore you can't just say, don't use hourly rates and just like charge by the value, because we all know that this is difficult.
Yeah.
But what I see as problematic with, not just me, but what I see as problematic is that hourly based pricing holds you back in a lot of senses. First of all, it punishes efficiency. So if you're fast, that means that you get less. Sure, you can maybe adjust your hourly rate, but there's only so much you can ask for per hour. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm a designer with a, I don't know, 300 euro hourly rate, if the market value of design in your country is maybe 60 euros per hour. So that's a bit difficult. Furthermore, with AI arising, we also get more efficient. So using AI punishes you even more. So you getting more efficient punishes you even more. So I feel like this model, to use this model as your main pricing strategy, is a little bit limiting and might be holding you back. Another reason is that time is not scalable. So people look at time as a resource when it's actually, in my opinion, a constraint. There's only so much hours in a day that you could work. And of course, only a small portion of the day is used really productively. So again, it's kind of like a restraint rather than a resource. And also if you have employees, there's only so much hours you can, how do you say, sie einsetzen.
You can
not use them.
Delegate them to work.
Exactly. And we all know that within those hours, not 100% of the hours are used productively. So you see, what I'm trying to say is that hourly based pricing has its limits and definitely has its downsides. And I think that it's not the best pricing model to choose when pricing projects, especially. Of course, there are use cases where you can use it, where it's easier to use it. And I also understand why you would use it, because it's like putting a price tag on something abstract is extremely difficult. And with time, you can just kind of like use the resources that you used, as in the time that you used, and put a price tag on it. But yeah, I don't know. If you look at it in detail, it's kind of like lacking.
Yeah, I think my main criticism is that, and this is also something that I was thinking about when I was writing about hourly based pricing, is that I think it's fair to sell your time if the task you are doing is something that someone else could do but doesn't have the time for. So then it seems fair because they're just delegating it to you and you're doing that in your time instead of them doing it in their time. And an example of this would be like, for example, like way back when I was working as a graphic designer for like a small local business, my boss was able to do newsletter templates. Like, she has a degree in marketing, like her aesthetic eye is also good. She would have been able to do those newsletters 100%, like probably even the way I did them. It would have taken her maybe a bit longer because she just doesn't do it every day. But it's not like a task that she needs she would have really needed like some agency for, or like some designer who is an art director, creative director, whatever for. And I feel like that kind of work, like in context with that client, if she were ever to come to me again for that, I would charge by the hour, because like it's not a really, it for me, it's not like a high value type of task. And there I think hourly based pricing makes sense. But for me, it's extremely like client dependent, and also context and task dependent. Because if an annoying client comes to you who you know they couldn't do it themselves, but like they act like they could, and then to sell your time there can be tricky, because they'll be like, oh, like why did that take you so long? Because they often like think their ego is bigger than like what they can actually do. You know, those posts on TikTok when someone was like, my ego tells me I can do that, but I know I can't. Like there are clients like that. Like their ego tells them they could have done the same thing that you did, but they can't, and that's the reality. And that's where it becomes tricky, because then they don't trust your expertise, they don't value your expertise, and then you're selling this time because that's the only thing they understand. And there's always like this resentment between you and the client. And I feel like that is something that happens when you do hourly based pricing, because those are the types of clients you end up working with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I know.
Yeah, I don't know if that was like made sense.
It made sense. In my ears, it did. Yeah.
Okay, so I think, and that's like that's the thing that comes into like, you know, a lot of people talk about value-based pricing. What is value-based pricing? And I think there are lots of different definitions to it and different ways to talk about it. I think the main thing for me is when you're thinking about hourly-based work and why it's not value-based, is the fact that you're selling often very valuable things, like your ideas, your ability to be creative, that your client doesn't have. And you're selling that as if it's just time spent doing the thing, which is not the only thing you're putting into it. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about like, it's a constraint and it's just like a fact. It took you 5 hours. But what is it that took you 5 hours? You know, what is the output? And the output gets lost a lot when you're doing hourly based pricing.
Yeah, I think that some people in the some creatives would argue that it's like fair.
Yeah.
Because the other thing might be unfair, because you are like putting an arbitrary number, like a value number, onto something that in their eyes might not even be worth that money. Let's take, for example, when we're saying, okay, whatever, we don't take on projects below X amount. I don't even know right now, but below X amount. And some people might find that outrageous and like, wow, we can do a website for way less than that. Like, okay, fine, but that's the value you put on your own work, and that's not my fault.
And also, it's not, and it also doesn't really matter, because there will always be clients for those people, and there will be clients for us, and there will be clients for people who charge more than us, and there will be clients for people who charge somewhere in the middle. Its value is extremely dependent on your client. Like, we could never sell our services or our website to the local business around the corner, because one, they probably don't have the budget for it, but two, they don't even need our services probably, and three, they don't even want that. They probably want like a really simple template that just has their branding on it, and they're gonna ask like their friend's daughter who just finished her graphic design degree to do it. Like that's what happens in that like budget area. And for us in our budget area, something else happens. People come to us that have an investment, or they have their savings that they're ready to invest in their business, and they have this all thought out, and they have their business plan, their financial plan, and they've allocated this amount to the website, and then they come to us to buy that service. It's a completely different value and like service proposition going on there. Yeah. And that's what people forget when they see like a price. They're like, that's outrageous. Yeah, for you and for your clients it is, but that's also why that's happening parallel to us, but not like with us, you know? So.
Yeah, it's just like with products, that products have different target groups. And since we're talking about products, I think it's also interesting that the service-based industry is so hard set on the time spent on a service, versus the product-based industry can literally just like price a product in whatever way and we will buy it. Have you ever walked into the Apple store and thought about, I don't know, how much did they work on this phone? Is it even worth it? How many hours did you spend on assembling this, and what were the material costs? You don't care. You pay for the output and not for the input. And I think that this is something that should also be applied in the creative industry, because we are creating outputs, we are creating a product. We are not just like, I don't know, like you said, like if you do something that is hardly an output, where you're just like, okay, I'm going to repair this, or I'm going to, I don't know, fix a template or change the font on this template. Yeah, of course you didn't create like the biggest output there. So I do believe that, for example, in that use case, hourly rate is completely fine. But when you do like, I mean, you make an output like a logo, when you make a website, with those things, they will generate profit. It's not just like a simple little thing in their agenda. It's like a huge thing that they will benefit from. And putting just your time as a budget there, I just feel like you're going to miss out on a lot of money. Yeah, for example, one more thing. I don't know where to put this, where to cut this in. But it's about hourly rate. It's about the hourly rate, and having like, for example, when you do a proposal and you list down your hours, what does this even mean? Like, okay, the client says, they're going to work this and that many hours on it, but first of all, who's going to check? Second of all, everyone just wants to see the end price. Like, everything listed there, how many hours it takes, is just grounds for them to say, can we reduce hours here? Can we reduce hours there? But the other way around, it wouldn't matter. Let's say, for example, you bid that and they approve that proposal, and while you start working on it, you notice, wait a second, this one point actually needs more hours. Then you have to start renegotiating with the client. Like, I don't know, this whole model is like, for me, even more arbitrary than just putting a number on an output.
Yeah. Before, I have something to say to that, but
sorry.
No, there's one thing I want to say about the Apple and the product versus service example, which I think is so interesting. And I mean, there's many reasons why Apple doesn't price by the hour, obviously. But I think it's also just logically speaking would be impossible, because they spend years developing a lot of the deals that they have. And then that goes into testing and production or whatever. Like they probably have the next 5 iPhones lined up, because it's like all happens years in advance. So it's like, obviously they can't put years of work into a price. They have to think of it as something else. Like, it's a product and they need to make a certain amount of profit and a certain amount of income to cover their fixed costs. They're thinking like, they have like long-term financial plans and financial goals. And that's where their price is coming from. It's not coming from like the actual input. And I think, and that's something we do too with our pricing, is we have like our financial plan, we have like the rough timelines that we usually use for a project. And then we have like a price based on that. Okay, these are our fixed costs for the year. These are the number of projects we would need, and they need to all have like this average amount. Or maybe we have one project here that brings in a lot, and then we have a smaller project here that brings in a little, and it all adds up to our final like financial plan, meeting the goals that we have for the year. That's how we do our pricing, so it has nothing to do with hourly. I think that going back to the proposal thing, the reason why people like to put the hours there, and I can understand it to an extent, is that clients understand it. Like, everyone understands hourly based pricing. Even clients who have never booked a service before will understand that price. So you understand it's easier for you, it's easier for your client. It seems super transparent, even though it potentially isn't, because like you said, who's going to actually check that you did work those hours? However, it leaves room to weird negotiations happening. It also leaves the door open to them potentially really checking in if you're actually taking that long. And then also questioning, like, why does this take so long? And like, is there any way you can do it faster so it's cheaper? And like, those aren't the types of clients you want to be working with. You want to be working with clients that see the output and the potential return they will get from that output, and then they are willing to invest a certain amount to get to that result.
It's also on us as service providers to educate the clients. Yeah. I know that this is our current system, but it wasn't this way always. We didn't this hourly rates is just kind of a recent development that has been happening in the agency world, like especially with the rise of the digital media. But before, they charged completely differently. They charged by commission, they charged by value rather than by billable hours. So if we went from commission to billable hours, we can also go from billable hours to maybe value-based pricing or output-based pricing, whatever you want to call it, something that punishes us as creatives less than the hourly based model. Because why I don't like it is because I feel like the hourly based pricing model usually ends up not working in our favor, but working in the client's favor. Because again, maybe I'm estimating 5 hours for, I don't know, for the first draft, but then it ends up taking me 20 hours. And it's completely unfair because I'm not going to see that money that I worked on it.
Unless you renegotiated it, yeah.
But who's going to do that? Like, realistically speaking, you can, of course, renegotiate, but the client's also going to be annoyed. We know how long it takes to finally push a budget through. Then renegotiating at almost every line item, because let's be so for real. What time have you estimated the right time, what it took you to execute the work? It's kind of like, you know, when you throw a dart thingy, you kind of know how long it takes, but you could end up taking 10 hours more just because there is some kind of weird blocker in it that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's a fair pricing model, just using that as your pricing strategy. Of course, you can use it to kind of like estimate a ballpark, to use it as part of your pricing strategy. I think that's totally fair, but not to use it as your main pricing strategy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I also think that the way what you were saying before, that it's more beneficial to the client than it is to you, also comes back to the fact that the client is buying your time and you're selling your time. And then there's like that transaction of time. But the thing that's missing in that equation is your creativity and the value of your creativity, which isn't being compensated in that case. You're only being compensated for the time you put in. But the ideas have so much value. I think that's something that people forget all the time, is like, you know, value-based pricing. We see Chris Do talk about it, and he always goes the angle of like, the client is going to be profiting off of your work, and there's got to be a return on investment, and how much revenue are they making, and like obviously value-based pricing has a lot to do with that. But it also just like in a simple way has to do with what is your work worth. And it is not just worth what your time is worth.
No, because
there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, for example, that it's really, really good what you said, because the client isn't literally buying your time. They're buying your work. They're buying your output. So why are you selling your time to them?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why they can actually renegotiate these things, because like, yeah, I want you to spend like 5 hours on it. But what if it's not possible in 5 hours, but you're still going to be like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can reduce the hours here so you get the client. But again, this model really doesn't benefit you unless you always overcharge them, unless you kind of, I don't know, always estimate way more hours and then just hope for the best. But again, it's so arbitrary. You could at the same time just be using value-based pricing at this point.
Yeah.
So now since we have kind of like shit talked hourly based pricing, maybe we should like give some actionable steps on how someone could change their pricing strategy tomorrow.
And also maybe like first of all, and this is something I also wrote in my LinkedIn post, I'm going to link it in the description because I think it is a good start to know like when to charge hourly and when not. But I also say this in that post, and it's that hourly based pricing isn't a pricing strategy. It's just a pricing model, but it's not a strategy. So strategy has to do with more than that. And that's like, okay, how do I reach a certain amount of profit, and what are my financial goals, and like, how do I get there? So the actual steps to like move away from hourly based pricing is, first of all, understand like when it makes sense and when it doesn't. And for that, I have a post, so I'm going to link that. If you're not even sure, like if your hourly rate is even sufficient, then check out the calculator. Why is an hourly rate good? An hourly rate is good as like a base price. It's good to figure out your fixed costs. And I think for that, it's a good exercise to calculate an hourly rate, which is what the calculator is for. And then I don't know what would be the next step after that?
Just adding to this step, it's also important to have a base price, because if you don't know your base price, you don't know if the project is gonna even cover your fixed costs.
Yeah, exactly. So
Continue.
So the hourly rate can be helpful, because if you know, I'm not going to go too much into this, but if you know like how much time you have a week to work, and it's not the 8-hour day, by the way.
That's also in our pricing calculator.
Yeah, that's very important, is to remember that you don't actually have 8 hours a day to work on client work. So how much time do you have to work in a week and how much time in a month? And then you know, like, okay, this project is coming in and how much time can I delegate to that? And how does that relate to my fixed costs? That's the base pricing model. That's also like, that's your strategy to be able to cover your fixed costs and potentially a bit of profit. But then the next step from there would be to think about what your work is actually worth. And then also to treat every single client differently, because your price, that would be the step after that, probably, is like, first of all, think about what your work is worth and how much you feel like you should be making, also as like a salary.
And I think the second step that would be profitable, that would be beneficial, is to like also check the market value of your work.
Yeah.
For example, like we said,
Competitor analysis, you mean?
Exactly, competitor analysis, but competitors that work for the same clients that you do. Not just like a general, what do other designers do? No, what do designers do? What do they charge people that work with your clientele?
Yeah, your skill set, maybe probably similar type of work. So if you're an illustrator, like another illustrator, and then what kind of clients are they working for? And then you need to make sure that you're in that market range with your prices. That would be a perfect way to figure out your worth in the relationship to the market. But then, let's say you're working with a certain type of client for a certain amount of time, and your clients are all relatively similar, then you can probably charge similar prices for similar work. But then Kylie Jenner's team comes to you, because that's what happened to us. Is we were working for smaller clients and like all the prices were kind of okay, I guess. But then obviously this huge client comes to us, and then we're thinking, okay, but this is Kylie Jenner's like website. Obviously we have to charge a different price, right? Like we already had this thinking going on back then. Did we charge enough back then? Probably not.
No.
But we still charged way more than we did any other project before. And that's why it is so important, like when a client comes to you, to think about who are they? What is this work for? Like what is this is it a campaign? Is it something that's going to bring them a lot of revenue? And that's where videos like from Chris Do are really helpful to understand that type of value-based pricing and how that works.
Yeah, I think that value-based pricing is also super nuanced, and we should do another episode on that, so I don't want to like dive into it in way more detail, but I think it's a good place to start, to watch like videos from Chris Do about value-based pricing, because it kind of like shifts your mindset, so for you to understand how people benefit from your work, because I think that designers often forget that they don't just produce like in our case, like a beautiful website. They do so much more for the client. The output isn't just the output is the beautiful website, but the value is completely different. And I think once you disconnect those two ideas, you start to realize, oh, I left probably a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. And I think so. Let's summarize the steps, because I feel like it was so chaotic.
It was really chaotic.
First step is understanding your hourly rate, obviously. Understanding when to use it and when not to use it. And when you don't use it, you need to understand how are you pricing your work otherwise. And that has a lot to do with your financial plan for a year and your goals. You should have financial goals that have to do with like how much profit do you want to make and what are you doing with that. Usually you're setting aside a certain amount so you have like a safety net. And then beyond that, you need to be thinking about how much money do you want to be making? Do you feel like you're making enough? Like, is your salary, does it make sense for what you feel like you are worth? How to check that? Check your competitors, check the market. And then beyond that would be thinking about like a true value-based price is something that's highly dependent on who your client is and how they're benefiting from your work. Thank you for listening to this episode of Never Went to Business School. Don't forget to follow us here on Spotify. And if you enjoy our content, check out our YouTube channel for more educational videos. and subscribe to our newsletter on Substack.